Chapter 781. Cheng Linin, the eldest daughter of the Protector General, was tested to have perfected innate mystic qi on the day she was 1 month old. She was taken in as the personal disciple of the Tianxian dynasty's #1 expert, the Great Consecrator. She was a renowned peerless genius in the entire Tianxian continent. Originally, according to the plot, Cheng Linin would learn from the Great Consecrator until she finished her apprenticeship at the age of 18. She represented the Tianxian dynasty in the competition among the younger generation and successfully won first place. After that, she advanced triumphantly, perfectly demonstrating what it meant to be a winner in life. Finally, she became one of the top figures in the Tianxian continent. However, after Cheng Ling came to this world, everything changed. Cheng Lingyu was just one of the many concubine daughters of the great general's residence, and the type that was least valued. Naturally, the servants of the Protector General's residence would not pay much attention to such a master, who was not valued by the family head. This time, Cheng Ling was able to come to Cheng Lingyu's body because Cheng Lingyu had an argument with another concubine's daughter, and both fell into the water. Cheng Lingyu had always been weak, and after falling into the water, she recovered from a cold. Cheng Ling, who inherited her body, felt that she owed her karma and should repay her. As for how to repay, firstly, she would not let go of the young lady who caused her to fall into the water and the culprit who caused Cheng Lingyu to become like this. Secondly, if the Protector General's residence had paid more attention to Cheng Lingyu after she fell ill, Cheng Lingyu would not have fallen to such a state. Therefore, the Protector General's residence was not a good thing. Cheng Ling, who was born as a mercenary, did not have many moral values in her head. She would not show mercy to those who were dangerous to her, and should be eradicated. Therefore, she pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger. First, she subdued the servant girl beside her, then found a way to poison the concubine's daughter, who pushed Cheng Lingyu into the water, causing her to itch all over, and causing her to die miserably. Later, she found that her identity was not simple. Her birth mother was not an ordinary servant girl, but a member of a mysterious clan, the Guyu clan. The Guyu clan members were born with the ability to practice a secret technique, but their talent had to be at least 18 years old to awaken. As she slowly accumulated her strength, she developed feelings for Tianxian dynasty's first prince, Xian Tiance, and the two of them made a promise of life and death. Xian Tiance's mother's family, the left prime minister's branch, had always been very dissatisfied with the Protector General's estate. Under Xian Tiance's plan and Cheng Lingyu's cooperation, the Protector General's estate was suspected of treason by the emperor, and the whole family was exterminated. There were only 2 survivors. Cheng Linin was the personal disciple of the head high priest. She grew up with the head high priest, so she was exempted from her crime. Cheng Lingyu was a good example of putting righteousness before family. She was also very powerful. Under Xian Tiance's suggestion, she was made the new Protector General of the state. Because of this stepsister, because of a groundless crime, her entire clan was wiped out. How could Cheng Linin not hate her? She wanted to take revenge on Cheng Lingyu. But Cheng Lingyu had already grown up, and was not someone she could touch. Cheng Lingyu was used to a life where the strong preyed on the weak. How could she not know how to eliminate the source of trouble? She told the emperor that Cheng Linin harbored resentment. When she grew stronger in the future, she would most likely seek revenge on the Tianxian dynasty. The emperor was very suspicious, and actually believed her words. After using the excuse of having the head priest leave the imperial city, he destroyed her sea of qi. Chapter 782. What did it feel like for a martial artist who had once stood at the top of the world to have her sea of qi destroyed? Cheng Linin wanted to die, but she survived. However, Cheng Lingyu wouldn't let her go. She felt that Cheng Linin was a terrifying person, and couldn't let her live. Even though the great reverend loved his disciple dearly, he couldn't stay by her side all the time. In the end, Cheng Linin was still killed by the pervasive assassination. When the great reverend heard the news, all he could do was vent his anger on a few scapegoats who had been abandoned a long time ago. Cheng Lingyu proudly became the great general who protected the country. She married the second prince and was always honorable and unrestrained. Many years later, No one would remember the crying and resentful souls of the deceased under this magnificent residence. Gu Xingyin's arrival in this world was very coincidental. It was the day before Cheng Lingyu transmigrated into Cheng Lingyu's body. Cheng Linin was 18 years old this year. Cheng Lingyu was a year younger than her, so her nominal age was 17. Gu Xingyin put away the jade flute in her hand. Not far away, a row of bamboo snapped at the roots. This jade flute was her weapon. The Great Reverend had personally gone to the Great Snowy Mountains in the north and found the jadeite essence that had been frozen for 1,000 years. He spent a great deal of effort to refine it. It was an extremely powerful magic spiritual weapon. Moreover, the flute had a hidden mechanism. With a slight push of a button, this small and exquisite jade flute could turn into an invisible killing sword within the flute. As a teacher, the Great Reverend truly doted on his only and youngest female disciple. Gu Xingyin put the jade flute back into her sleeve and walked into a large hall. The Great Reverend lived in the tallest Xiantian tower in the Tianxian dynasty's imperial city. Gu Xingyin had been taken away by him when she was 1 month old, and had practically grown up here. Teacher, Gu Xingyin respectfully called from outside the hall. The door opened soundlessly. Gu Xingyin knew that the people inside the hall wanted her to enter. Gu Xingyin walked in with familiarity. The decorations in this hall were exquisite and gorgeous. In the direction of the main seat, there was a square white jade platform, and on the white jade platform sat a white-clothed man. The man in white looked very young, only in his early 20s. However, Gu Xingyin knew that he had already looked like this more than 10 years ago, or even earlier. No one knew how long the High Elder had lived. It was as if he had always lived in the Xiantian Tower, guarding the imperial city. No one knew how strong the head consecrator was. They only knew that as long as the head consecrator was present, no one would dare to be disrespectful to the Tianxian dynasty. Teacher. Gu Xingyin gave him a proper bow. The man in white opened his eyes. As he opened his eyes, the entire hall seemed to light up. His previously blurry face was now clearly imprinted in Gu Xingyin's eyes. This was a shockingly handsome face. Every stroke of his facial features seemed to have been meticulously drawn by someone. There was not a single imperfection on his face. The only imperfection was that the eyes on this face were too calm. It was so calm that it was as if nothing in this world could cause them to waver. However, it was only as if, because there was such a person in front of him. Looking at his beloved disciple, a gentle ripple appeared in the head consecrator's calm eyes. He opened his mouth and said, "Linin, what business do you have with me?" His voice was just like his person. It was extremely pleasant to listen to, but also extremely cold. Chapter 783. Gu Xingyin admired his beauty inwardly, then said, "Teacher, I would like to return home in a few days. It will be my grandmother's birthday in a few days. This time, I would like to accompany her for a few more days." The head consecrator would never reject such a small matter. He nodded slightly. "You can go by yourself. Remember to be careful." Gu Xingyin nodded. Just as she was about to leave, she saw that the head consecrator was about to close his eyes again. At a certain moment, she felt that this man was extremely lonely. The head consecrator only felt that something had suddenly approached him. He instinctively wanted to wave it away, but he realized that it was his little disciple. He paused for a moment, and at this moment his neck was hugged by someone. His entire body stiffened. No one had ever dared to treat him like this. "Linin?" he asked in confusion. Gu Xingyin felt the somewhat tense body in her embrace, and her mood suddenly became extremely good. "Teacher, Enair thinks that you are the best teacher in this world." So she was acting coquettishly? The head consecrator understood. However, ever since Lin Yin was 6 years old, she had never asked him to hug her again. He felt somewhat comfortable inwardly, but on the surface he still said lightly, "You are also old. Next time, don't be so unseemly." However, as soon as he finished speaking, he felt the arm around his shoulder tighten. "I won't," Gu Xingyin said righteously. "I grew up with you, teacher. You are the person closest to me, and also my biggest support. If I don't kiss you, who should I kiss?" The head consecrator felt helpless. He had taken in a total of 3 disciples. His first disciple had already exhausted her lifespan and was no longer in this world. His second disciple was also a famous elite warrior in the Tianxian land. Only this third disciple was his only female disciple. She was also brought up by him. He couldn't help but indulge her a little, which caused his personality to become somewhat arrogant. However, facing such Lin Yin, he couldn't bear to be ruthless. Just as he was thinking, Gu Xingyin suddenly spoke again. "Teacher, when is your birthday? All these years, Yin has never heard you mention it." Birthday? He was stunned for a moment. How long had it been since someone had mentioned this matter? The people who knew his birthday had long disappeared on this road, and he had never paid attention to it. Therefore, when Gu Xingyin asked, he actually thought about it carefully. Why do you need to know about these trivial matters? Gu Xingyin couldn't help but feel a little sorry for this person. She said discontentedly, "How is this a small matter? It's obviously an extremely important matter." In the end, under Gu Xingyin's coaxing and pestering, she finally learned a specific time and left the Xiantian Tower with satisfaction. She didn't know that after she left, the person in the tower touched his shoulder with his left hand. It seemed to still have the warmth of her body just now, mixed with a faint fragrance of a girl. This warmth made people yearn for it. Then, a smile quietly blossomed at the corner of his mouth. Although it was very shallow, it was enough to shock the world. Unfortunately, he didn't get to see this rare scene in 100 years. Lin Yin. He whispered his little disciple's name. He felt that there seemed to be some changes in her. However, this Lin Yin seemed to be even more adorable than before. Chapter 784. The Return of the Eldest Miss, who lived in the Xiantian Tower all year round, was a major event in the great general's residence. Everyone in the residence knew that the eldest miss was one of the noblest people in the residence. Even though she rarely appeared in the residence, no one dared to underestimate her. She was a genius warrior who had perfected her profound qi, and was the disciple of the head consecrator. In everyone's eyes, the personal disciple of the head consecrator was much more honorable than the princes and princesses in the imperial city. Gu Xingyin was personally welcomed into the residence by her mother, the wife of the great general. When she arrived at the residence, she saw the old madam, who was about to celebrate her birthday. Naturally, it was another intimate meeting between a grandmother and her granddaughter. Those concubine ladies who usually didn't have the qualifications to come to the old madam's courtyard were all informed to dress up and go see the eldest miss. Cheng Lingyu was among them. However, she was an unfavored concubine's daughter and had a cowardly personality. How could she have anything good to show off? No matter what, the people in the main courtyard were only responsible for giving orders. She had to figure out the rest by herself. Gu Xingyin saw a large number of her younger sisters in the old madam's courtyard. In this world, warriors lived long lives. Male warriors had strong bodies and naturally had more needs than ordinary people. Therefore, in addition to the great general's wife, he also had 2 concubines. The rest of the concubines and maids were as numerous as the hairs on an ox. Therefore, Cheng Lingyin's brothers and sisters were also a large number. These younger siblings were also very curious about this elder sister, who had basically lived in legends. In the great general's residence, they had heard the most about this elder sister's deeds. Now that they saw the real person, they were all very reserved. Gu Xingyin looked at them one by one. She had to admit that the great general's residence had good genes. Among these younger sisters, none of them were ugly. As for the difference, it was the difference between good-looking, very good-looking, and extremely good-looking. When it was Cheng Lingyu's turn, Gu Xingyin focused all her attention on her. Cheng Lingyu wasn't tall. Although she was a 16-year-old girl, she looked about the same height as a 14-year-old girl. It was obvious that she was malnourished. Looking at her face, he saw that her facial features were beautiful with a hint of sickly paleness. She was definitely a beauty. However, her eyes were filled with a timid look, which reduced her beauty from 8 points to 5 points. Gu Xingyin was a little puzzled. Although it was inevitable that the servants of the general's residence would step on those of higher status, no matter how unfavored Cheng Lingyu was, she was still a master. How could she be in such a state of malnutrition? It seemed that he would have to do a thorough investigation later. For Cheng Lingyu, the sight of Gu Xingyin made her feel extremely inferior. This elder sister of his possessed unparalleled talent and a somewhat impressive family background. In fact, even her appearance was incomparably gorgeous. She was like a celestial being. When she spoke to others, she lifted her chin slightly and her eyes were full of vigor. That was the most proud and reserved posture. Only people with enough confidence could have such vigor. She was afraid that she would never have such an opportunity in her life. After seeing their elder sister, old Madame naturally didn't keep these young ladies for long. Instead, she asked them to return to their courtyard. Of course, she wanted to cultivate a relationship with her granddaughter, whom she hadn't seen for more than half a year. Watching Cheng Lingyu leave, Gu Xingyin lowered her head and gave a few instructions to her personal maidservant. The maidservant was obviously a little surprised, but she still turned and left. Chapter 785. When Cheng Lingyu was about to return to her courtyard, she was stopped by someone. She looked up and found that it was Cheng Lingyue, the fourth miss of the courtyard next door. Cheng Lingyue had been at odds with her since they were young. She liked to tease her when they were young. When she grew up, she was even worse. Every time they met, she would make things difficult for her. It was reasonable to say that they were of similar status. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been assigned to the same courtyard. However, Cheng Lingyue was shrewish while Cheng Lingyu was timid. She always looked like a bullied little wife. Cheng Lingyue liked to bully her. Oh, let me see. Fifth sister's new dress looks good. Cheng Lingyue looked at her dress critically. Cheng Lingyu nervously grasped the hem of her dress. This dress was made by her personal maid, Xiaolian, who stayed up all night. She knew what Cheng Lingyue meant. Ever since she was young, Cheng Lingyue would snatch anything from her whenever she saw it. Usually, she would tolerate it. However, Xiaolian stayed up for 2 nights to make this dress for her. She hoped that she could leave a good impression on old Madame when she went to visit her. She didn't want to tolerate it today. And for some reason, she suddenly thought of the elder sister she saw in old Madame's honor hall today. She saw her elder sister surrounded by people. If it were her, she would have impatiently retorted when she encountered such a situation, right? No, who would dare to do that to her? Cheng Lingyu laughed self-deprecatingly. Although she couldn't be as proud as her, at the very least, she couldn't swallow her pride when others humiliated her, right? She encouraged herself in her heart, and tried to smile at Cheng Lingyue. Fourth sister, thank you for your compliment. I like this dress very much. My maid Xiaolian made it for me. If you like it, you can ask your maid to make one for you. Cheng Lingyue exclaimed in surprise. She looked at Cheng Lingyu carefully and sneered. What's wrong with you today? My good little sister actually dares to say such a long string of words? Her face turned cold. Then I'll be frank. I like your dress and want to borrow it for 2 days. Sister, you won't refuse, right? Cheng Lingyu bit her lip and looked at her firmly. Fourth sister, I don't want to. Cheng Lingyue did not expect that her sister, who had always been weak, would dare to disobey her. In a moment of anger, she walked over and tried to pull her away. You don't want to? I must get it today no matter what. For the first time in her life, Cheng Lingyu summoned up the courage to fight with her elder sister. This was a fake mountain, and below it was a man-made pond built for aesthetic purposes. The two of them were getting closer and closer to the pond. A figure quickly rushed over. He stretched out his hand and patted the bodies of the 2 men. The 2 men felt as if they had been electrocuted, and their bodies went limp. Who is it? Cheng Lingyue frowned, and was about to curse when her eyes caught sight of the woman's skirt. Her pupils shrank. She recognized this dress. It belonged to the maidservant of her elder sister. The reason why she remembered it so clearly was because she was jealous. Even the personal maidservant of eldest sister was wearing clothes of better quality than her, the 4th Mississippi. However, no matter how much she complained in her heart, she didn't dare to say anything. Ming Kei stood to the side and respectfully said to the 2. This servant saw that there seemed to be a misunderstanding between the 2 misses. Our miss said that the old Madame's birthday is coming up, so it's best not to have any unhappy things happen in the residence. Gu Xingyin had stopped the accident. She wanted to see if Cheng Lingyu would have been able to come to this world successfully if the accident had not happened. Chapter 786. Gu Xingyin had Ming Ke keep an eye on Cheng Lingyu's courtyard. Ming Ke did not understand why her master wanted her to keep an eye on the fifth young miss and make sure nothing happened to her. However, she did not dare to ask too much about her master's intentions and could only comply. Gu Xingyin observed Cheng Lingyu. Cheng Lingyu did not fall into the water that day and naturally did not catch a cold. On the second day, Cheng Lingyu was still the healthy Cheng Lingyu. On the third day, it rained. When Cheng Lingyu was about to leave her room, she slipped and was about to fall. Ming Ke, who was hiding in the dark, hurriedly sent a hidden force to Cheng Lingyu's body, stabilizing her shaky body. Nothing happened on the fourth day. Nothing happened on the fifth day. The sixth day was the old madam's birthday. The country's great general's manor could be considered a first-rate family in the Tianxian dynasty. Almost all of the influential families in Huangfu sent representatives to congratulate the old madam on her birthday. As the young miss of the general's manor, Cheng Lingyu naturally had to attend such an occasion. Furthermore, the manor had specially prepared beautiful clothes for these unfavored young misses, so that they would not disgrace the general's manor. Cheng Lingyu tugged at the smooth material on her body and was a little reserved. Gu Xingyin glanced at her and suddenly walked over. "You don't need to be too nervous. Just stay to the side and eat well." Cheng Lingyu was startled and looked at the person in front of her. She did not think that her elder sister, who was the moon surrounded by stars, would come over to comfort her. She was a little moved and bowed. "Thank you for your concern, elder sister." Gu Xingyin nodded to her and left. If she was too close to Cheng Lingyu, it would not be good for her. Ming Ke continued to follow the fifth young miss in the shadows. His Highness the eldest prince and His Highness the second prince have arrived. A shout came from afar. Gu Xingyin looked up and saw two men dressed in black robes with cloud patterns that symbolized the royal family's status walking over. The one on the left was slightly taller and had a gentle smile on his handsome face. This was the eldest prince, Xian Tianhao, born from the emperor and empress. He was also the prince most likely to become the next emperor. On the right was the second prince, Xian Tianche. His facial features were even more handsome than the eldest prince's. He had inherited the beauty of his mother's favorite concubine. His expression was not as gentle as the eldest prince's. Instead, it carried a sense of lofty arrogance. However, no one felt that there was anything wrong with it. The prince of the imperial family naturally had the right to be proud. When the first prince saw Gu Xingyin, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. The empress's family had always wanted the first prince to marry Cheng Lingyin. That way, they would be able to gain the support of the head consecrator behind Cheng Lingyin, and the first prince's position would be even more stable. They couldn't be blamed for being paranoid. Over the years, the imperial concubine's bloodline had been eyeing the second prince covetously. Now that the second prince had grown up and was quite outstanding, he was deeply loved by the emperor. They could not help but worry. However, the great general protector's manor did not want Cheng Lingyin to marry the first prince. Their family was already extremely noble. There was no need for them to marry another girl into the imperial family to show off their nobility. Also, since ancient times, it was fine if they succeeded in getting involved in the imperial family's struggles, but which of those who failed had a good ending? Cheng Lingyin did not have any feelings for the first prince. Fortunately, she had a good teacher. If she was unwilling, no one could force her. "Ain, how long will you be staying at the manor this time?" The first prince asked happily. Gu Xingyin's expression was indifferent. "When grandmother's birthday is over, I will return to the Xiantian Tower." The first prince was a little disappointed. Chapter 787. The second prince looked at the two of them coldly. A trace of mockery flashed through his eyes. The girl clearly didn't want to talk, but his brother still wanted to talk to her. How embarrassing. Xiantian so had always hated Cheng Lingyin, who was praised by everyone in the imperial city. She was just the daughter of a lowly official, but she was more respected than he was in front of his father. Gu Xingyin was about to find an excuse to leave, but her heart suddenly trembled. She was extremely fast. Her figure flashed and appeared behind the eldest prince. At the same time, a green light flashed in her sleeve. The sword in her flute shot out and cut off a sword that was coming at her from the side. Protect the eldest prince. The surrounding guests were shocked. Seeing that his attack missed, the assassin seemed to know that he didn't have a chance. He didn't want to continue fighting. He quickly retreated and was about to leave. How could Gu Xingyin let him leave so easily? She didn't chase after him. Instead, she put the jade flute in her hand under her lips. A melodious sound came from the flute. At the same time, a hazy green shadow seemed to fall from the sky, blocking the masked assassin's path of retreat. There was a net on 3 sides. Gu Xingyin was waiting for him behind. The assassin's eyes narrowed when he saw the green shadow. He clearly recognized what it was. He also knew that it was a treasure personally refined by the head priest. There was no way he could break it with his own strength. He turned around and looked behind him. Then he pounced in Gu Xingyin's direction. Gu Xingyin flew up and prepared to meet the enemy. Suddenly, she felt that something was wrong. Protect the women. However, the assassin was too fast. In the blink of an eye, he rushed into the crowd and grabbed a woman in luxurious clothes. He pressed the broken sword in his hand against her neck. Let me go, or I'll bury her with me. His voice was hoarse as he looked at the guards who had rushed over to surround him. The people from the Protector General's manor relaxed when they saw who he was holding hostage. It was just a concubine's daughter. Gu Xingyin's heart tightened. The person who was being held hostage was Cheng Lingyu. She was already very careful. Could it be that Cheng Lingyu still couldn't escape? She looked at the eldest prince. This assassin was after the eldest prince. She wanted to save Cheng Lingyu, but she had to ask the eldest prince's permission. Although the first prince didn't recognize Cheng Lingyu and wanted to take down this madwoman who dared to assassinate him, he had to show his benevolent side in front of so many aristocratic families. If you spare the life of the young miss in your arms, this prince can let you leave, he said, inwardly gritting his teeth. The assassin sneered, hypocrite. His eyes swept around. Didn't you hear what your master said? Back off. The surrounding guards made way for them, and the assassin didn't slow down at all. After a few flashes, they disappeared from sight. Let's go and check on fifth sister. Gu Xingyin was worried about Cheng Lingyu, so she quickly followed them. Not far from the general's mansion, Cheng Lingyu was knocked out and put aside. Gu Xingyin examined him. Fortunately, there were no other injuries. Such injuries shouldn't cause any problems, right? She ordered people to bring Fifth Miss back to rest. After this incident, the joyous atmosphere had been diluted quite a bit. Many of the guests had already returned to their residences. When Gu Xingyin received Ming Kei's message the next day, she realized that she had been too naive. The fifth miss woke up after 4 hours. When I looked at her, she looked... Ming Kei paused for a moment but still said, like a different person. Chapter 788. The moment Cheng Ling woke up, she felt that something was wrong. She didn't move, but carefully sensed her surroundings. After making sure that there was no one in the room, she opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was a plain white curtain embroidered with butterflies and flowers. When she looked up, she saw the antique furniture. Even her white inner clothes were of a style that she had never seen before. What happened? Her strong mental fortitude forced her to calm down. She sensed that although this body was a little weak, there was nothing wrong with it. She got off the bed and scanned the room. Cheng Ling barely found something that could be called a mirror. The mirror wasn't clear, but Cheng Ling saw it clearly at first glance. It was a completely unfamiliar face. It wasn't Cheng Ling. She sat quietly on the chair and began to think about what had happened. She had stepped into someone's trap. It was certain that she had died from being shot multiple times. Those people wouldn't have let her come back to life. So now she had reincarnated in someone else's body. What had happened to the original owner of this body? Creak. The door was gently pushed open. A girl dressed as a servant girl around 15 or 16 years old came in with a basin of water. She saw Cheng Ling sitting in front of the mirror. I am Miss, you're awake? Xiao Lian put down the things in her hands and said happily. Cheng Ling didn't know who she was, so she only responded with a faint Miss, I just brought in some hot water. I'll help you freshen up first. I'll send someone to inform old Madam and eldest Mississippi. They're very worried about you, the servant girl said. Cheng-Ling didn't understand what she was saying. After thinking for a while, she suddenly screamed and pressed her head. She looked like she was in pain. Miss, what's wrong? Xiao Lian was shocked to see her like this. I'll get the doctor to take a look. Get the doctor? Cheng-Ling's eyes flashed. She grabbed Xiao Lian, who was about to leave. There's no need. I'm feeling better now. Xiao Lian knew that her miss was used to being patient, so she didn't think that there was anything wrong. Cheng-Ling said tentatively, I feel a little confused. Who are old Madam and eldest miss that you mentioned? She secretly made preparations in her hands. If this little girl's reaction was wrong in the slightest, then don't blame her for being ruthless. Xiao Lian seemed to be stunned by her question. She stared blankly at her mistress. When Cheng-Ling was getting impatient, she finally burst into tears. Cheng-Ling. Xiao Lian looked at her and said, Miss, you didn't hurt your head, did you? Cheng-Ling. Her hands were itching. The servant girl continued to ask, Then, miss, do you still remember this servant? Cheng-Ling shook her head honestly. Seeing that the girl who called herself Xiao Lian was about to cry again, Cheng-Ling made a prompt decision and shouted, Shut up. Xiao Lian seemed to be frightened. She opened her eyes and looked at the miss, who seemed different from usual. Cheng-Ling face-bombed. I just woke up and realized that I can't remember anything from the past. Can you tell me more about it? Xiao Lian's first reaction was, I'll get a doctor. Cheng-Ling. Come back. The servant girl sat back down under Cheng-Ling's oppressive gaze. She followed Cheng-Ling's instructions and started to talk about the fifth miss, Cheng-Ling Yu's identity, the masters of the Protector General's residence, and some general knowledge about the Tianxian continent. Chapter 789. After she finished, Xiao Lian looked at Cheng-Ling worriedly. Young mistress, why don't I ask the old madam and ask her to invite a good doctor for you? The old madam? Cheng-Ling. Now Cheng-Ling Yu frowned. According to Xiao Lian's description, the old madam was not a simple person. Her excuse could fool this silly little girl, but it might not be able to fool a truly shrewd person. Thinking about the personality of the fifth young mistress, she said, There's no need to trouble the old madam. There's nothing wrong with my body. I think this is just a side effect. Perhaps I'll be able to remember some things after a while. After she finished speaking, she saw the little maid looking at her with a pained expression. Young mistress, you don't cherish yourself. Cheng-Ling was speechless. She revealed a saintly smile and remained silent. She said to Xiao Lian in a low voice, I don't remember anything from the past. Don't tell anyone about this, okay? Xiao Lian felt that the young mistress now was different from before. In the past, the young mistress would not speak to her so forcefully. However, the young mistress now was more like a master. She nodded. Young mistress, are you hungry? I'll go to the kitchen and get you something to eat. After hearing her words, Cheng-Ling did feel a little hungry. Xiao Lian left. After Xiao Lian left, Cheng-Ling put away the expression on her face and began to think about her current situation with a cold expression. An unfavored young mistress of a concubine? In the Tianxian continent, such an identity would usually be married off with a favored sister or be given away as a sacrifice by the family. How could she be willing to accept this? Suddenly, she felt that someone was looking at her. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly regained her melancholy expression. Who was it? Ming Ke quietly left the small courtyard. After listening to Ming Ke's story and seeing the system notification the moment Cheng-Ling arrived in this world, Gu Xingyi knew that it was useless to try to stop her. What was meant to come would eventually come. For a moment, killing intent rose in her heart. If he went to Cheng-Ling Yu's courtyard now and did something to her, would Cheng-Ling Yu be able to cause any more trouble? She had countless ways to kill Cheng-Ling without anyone noticing. Of course, with her status, even if she was discovered, the Protector General's manor would only think of a way to cover her up. Ming Ke lowered her head and felt the killing intent from her master. She was puzzled. He wondered what the fifth miss had done to offend his master. Gu Xingyi's killing intent only lasted for a moment. She couldn't do that. No matter how much she knew in her heart, if she were to attack Chengling now, it was very likely that she would be able to eliminate the threat that Chengling might pose in the future. However, she just couldn't do it. Why should he let the Chengling of this world bear the sins of the original plot? The system sensed her thoughts and thought to itself, looks like I've unknowingly cultivated a host with extremely positive values. Gu Xingyin gestured for Ming Ke to leave. System, from now on monitor Chengling's every move. If she's like in the original plot. A cold light flashed in Gu Xingyin's eyes. Then don't blame me for being ruthless. Chapter 790. The day before returning to the Xiantian Tower, Gu Xingyin specially came to visit her frightened and bedridden fifth sister. Chengling frowned when she heard the news. She had also heard about Chengling from Xiaolian. She and Chengling were people from two completely different worlds. It could be seen from the name. In the great general's estate, the direct descendants all had the surname Lin, while the concubines could only take the name Ling. In any case, Chengling had already come to the courtyard, so she had to get up and meet her. Fifth sister, are you feeling better these past 2 days? Gu Xingyin glanced at the surrounding environment. Although it wasn't as gorgeous and exquisite as her courtyard, it didn't mistreat her. She carefully sized up Chengling. Her face was pale, her expression docile, and her eyes were evasive. She was still the same as before. Her acting skills were not bad. Chengling was also discreetly sizing up Gu Xingyin. From the moment Gu Xingyin came in, the instinct engraved in the depths of her soul drove her to stay away from this person. Chengling was very strong, so strong that she was no match for her. She lowered her head and softly replied, "Thank you for your concern, eldest sister. I'm fine now." Gu Xingyin didn't stay for long. She only said a few words and left a lot of precious herbs before leaving. After Gu Xingyin left, Chengling swept away her previous timidity. Her gaze swept over the neatly arranged herbs and she sneered. "Young miss, did eldest miss send these over? They're all good things. I'll go boil the medicine for you." Xiaolian came in and said in surprise when she saw these things. Chengling looked at the little girl busying herself and didn't say anything. Was Chengling concerned about her? Chengling was a high and mighty person who had only met her a few times. Why would she suddenly care about her? What did she want from her? Or rather, what did she want from her? Chengling didn't understand, but she believed that Chengling's goal wasn't simple. Chengling's expression only turned cold after Xiaolian happily took a stock of spiritual medicine to boil for her. "Don't think that you can bribe me with just a few herbs." She had experienced how the Protector General's residents had treated Chengling all these years. Since she had come to this body, she would naturally repay it on her behalf. Chengling, as well as those who had ignored her for so many years, would not be left out. Gu Xingyin returned to the Xiantian Tower. There were very few people on this high tower. The head reverend didn't need anyone to serve him. Only Chengling and a few servants were left in the Xiantian Tower. Gu Xingyin went to see the high priest. "Teacher." The high priest opened his eyes. "You're back." "Yes," Gu Xingyin replied. She looked like she wanted to say something but hesitated. How could the high priest miss this opportunity? He said, "If you have anything to say, just say it." Gu Xingyin's expression became serious. "Yes." She began to talk about nothing else but Chengling. "My fifth sister seems to be different from before. I suspect that she might have been possessed," she said with a frown. Although possession was rare in the Tianxian continent, it wasn't something that had never happened before. However, possession was very cruel to the original owner. The soul that had been possessed would dissipate without any support. Therefore, possession was also seen as a demonic technique. In the Tianxian land, almost everyone had the right to kill a person who had taken over another's body. Chapter 791. Gu Xingyin's soul entering this body was, in a sense, a possession. However, when she came to the mission world, someone had used heaven-defying means to reverse time and space. Strictly speaking, she was in a parallel world to her original world. This female lead soul had long left this world after her original life. Moreover, No one in this world would be able to find anything wrong with this body that was created by the system. However, Cheng Lingyu was different. Although Cheng Lingyu didn't know why she had entered Cheng Lingyu's body, it was a fact that she had taken over Cheng Lingyu's body. Cheng Lingyu hadn't lost her vitality to begin with. Therefore, without a soul to rely on, her soul would dissipate from this world sooner or later. Possession. The cold voice repeated the word. Gu Xingyin nodded. I have such a guess. The high priest glanced at her. Are you close to your fifth sister? Gu Xingyin saw him looking at him and shook his head honestly. I grew up with my teacher since I was a child. I've only met my siblings a few times at most. The high priest closed his eyes. That has nothing to do with you. Gu Xingyin sighed inwardly. She knew the high priest's reaction would be like this. In his eyes, other than a few people who still had some sense of existence, the rest had nothing to do with him. She gritted her teeth. If that person is evil and wants to frame the great general's residence, if that's the case, I'll personally end her. The high priest opened his eyes helplessly and looked at his little disciple. There was a hint of doting in his voice. Linin, if you want to reach the peak of martial arts, you can't have too many distracting thoughts in your heart. Gu Xingyin's expression froze for a moment before he lowered his head. I understand. She left the hall and asked the system. Are you sure there's nothing wrong with Cheng Lingyu's soul? The system replied with certainty. Don't worry. Cheng Lingyu didn't possess a normal body. She didn't devour or drive away Cheng Lingyu's soul. Cheng Lingyu is only temporarily in a deep sleep. In other words, there were two souls in Cheng Lingyu's body. The real Cheng Lingyu had fallen into a deep sleep, and Cheng Ling had taken over the body. Gu Xingyin already knew about this beforehand, so she purposely mentioned it to the head consecrator just to inform him of this matter. If the price of Cheng Ling's awakening was the death of Cheng Lingyu's soul, she would not show any mercy. If Cheng Lingyu were to cause trouble in the future, the high priest would not stand by and do nothing. Although she wouldn't kill her, she would restrict her every move one step at a time. Since Cheng Ling was able to come back to life in Cheng Lingyu's body after her death, it was a gift from fate. Now, he only hoped that she would be able to stay here peacefully and not let down this hard-won second rebirth. The residence of the Protector General. Fifth sister. Big sister is here to see you. A loud female voice sounded from outside the courtyard. Cheng Lingyu turned to look at Xiaolian. Xiaolian immediately answered, It's Miss Hua. Fourth Miss Cheng Lingyue, the one who loved to bully Cheng Lingyu? Cheng Lingyu raised her eyebrows. She had been busy investigating the plasticity of this body and hadn't gone looking for trouble with Cheng Lingyue, but Cheng Lingyue had come looking for her. The door opened and Cheng Lingyu walked out. She looked at Cheng Lingyue standing in the courtyard with a half-smile. What brings you here, fourth sister? Chapter 792. Cheng Lingyue was stunned to see Cheng Lingyu like this. Since when could this cowardly and timid fifth sister show such a calm expression in front of him? She must be pretending to be calm. Cheng Lingyue thought. She knew Cheng Lingyu's character best. Cheng Lingyue smiled maliciously. Weren't you frightened last time? I heard Big Sister sent you a lot of precious herbs. In my opinion, Big Sister's medicinal herbs are really good. I can see that little sister's complexion has improved a lot. Cheng Lingyu knew what Cheng Lingyue meant. She wanted to get her hands on those herbs. It just so happens that Big Sister hasn't been feeling well these days. Are you willing to part with them? Cheng Lingyu looked at Cheng Lingyue mockingly. To be honest, she really looked down on people like Cheng Lingyue. She didn't have any ability, but she was jealous. Whenever she saw something good in others, she would want to take advantage of it. But she didn't want her to get her way. She said indifferently, Big Sister felt sorry for me because I walked around the gates of hell. So, she brought me those herbs. Fourth sister, do you want them because you want to go there first? Cheng Lingyue's face turned green. Cheng Lingyu, how dare you curse me? Cheng Lingyu was expressionless. Fourth sister, you can change your face too? I thought you were so thick-skinned that I couldn't see any expression. Cheng Lingyue was used to being arrogant and thought her sister was easy to bully. Now that she was ridiculing her, she was naturally angry. She didn't even think before raising her hand to slap her. Today, I'll teach you what it means to respect your elder sister. Cheng Lingyu had long seen that fourth sister was just a facade. If she really had Xianqi talent, she wouldn't live with Cheng Lingyu. She moved her feet and dodged Cheng Lingyu's slap. Then she grabbed the side of Cheng Lingyu's hand. Slap. Cheng Lingyu's palm landed squarely on her own face. How dare you hit me? Cheng Lingyu was furious. Cheng Lingyu looked innocent. Fourth sister, you were careless. I didn't do anything. Cheng Lingyu refused to believe it, and tried to hit her again. Of course, it was impossible for her to succeed. Cheng Lingyu was kicked to the ground. She looked at Cheng Lingyu in disbelief. Is this the trash Cheng Lingyu? How could this be? Although Cheng Lingyu had no primordial qi in her body, she had recovered 30% of her strength after days of continuous training. Subduing Cheng Lingyu was a piece of cake for her. Cheng Lingyu was finally scared. She looked at Cheng Lingyu in horror. You. How did Cheng Lingyu become like this? You're not her, right? Cheng Lingyu's expression turned cold. She looked around and saw that Xiao Lian had gone to get her medicine. Cheng Lingyu had come alone, so no one had heard what they had said. She gently walked to Cheng Lingyu's side and grabbed her by the collar, forcing her to raise her head. My good sister, you have to know what it means to have a loose tongue. If you don't know how to speak, then there's no need for this tongue. She looked terrifying, and Cheng Lingyu could clearly sense the murderous intent coming from her. I was just joking. Fifth sister, you were just joking with me, right? She tried to put on a smile. Whether it's a joke or not depends on you, fourth sister. Cheng Lingyu pulled her up and gently smoothed her collar. Cheng Lingyu ran out of the courtyard in embarrassment. Chapter 793. Cheng Lingyu looked at her coldly. A moment ago, when she was tidying Cheng Lingyu's collar, she added a little something. It would be safer for this fourth sister to keep her mouth shut forever. How interesting. A lazy voice came from above. Who is it? Cheng Lingyu felt apprehensive inwardly. There was someone nearby, but she did not sense it at all. It meant that there was a huge difference in strength between her and this person. A figure dressed in black appeared before her. Cheng Lingyu narrowed her eyes and glanced at him. Your Highness, the second prince? Xian Tiance sized up the girl before him with great interest. She had a pretty face, but she was far from being important. Seeing that she lived in such a remote courtyard, he assumed that she would not be an important person in the great general's mansion. I didn't know that there was such a wonderful person like you in this mansion. How come he did not realize it before? Oh, that's not right. That person who left just now said that she was a completely different person. Murderous intent flashed across Cheng Lingyu's mind. Clearly, this man had heard her conversation with Cheng Lingyu. During this time, she had learned a lot of common knowledge about the Tianxian land. She understood that if someone were to discover her situation, the consequences would not be good. Xian Tiance felt her murderous intent, but he did not take it to heart. Put away your murderous intent, I mean you no harm. Cheng Lingyu looked at him coldly. Why should I believe you? Xian Tiance squinted his eyes, and the pressure from his body pressed down on Cheng Lingyu. If I wanted your life, I wouldn't have to spend any effort. What do you want? Cheng Lingyu was not stupid. Certainly, he wanted something from her since he was talking so much. I want to work with you. Xian Tiance smiled meaningfully. Do you hate this place? Do you hate this great general's mansion? You're clearly a noble master, but you're even worse off than a decent servant. When Gu Xingyin learned that Cheng Lingyu had hooked up with the second prince, her expression was indescribable, especially when she heard the system's detailed description. She did not care how the second prince was able to enter the great general's mansion's womenfolk's backyard. Currently, Cheng Lingyu was only a useless person with no talent and no favor. Of all the people the second prince could work with, he actually took the initiative to ask her to work with him? System, can you give me a logical reason? The system replied. No. Gu Xingyin asked why. The system said. The original plot was like this as well. If the host has any questions, he can return to this world to question the world's laws after he becomes strong enough. Gu Xingyin. System, you can do it. She did not dwell on this. Anyway, It was probably some weird reason that the plot had automatically completed itself. What mattered now was that Cheng Lingyu and the second prince had joined hands, just like in the plot. They had already taken the first step to dismantling the great general's residence. Since she didn't have any goodwill towards the great general's estate, there was no need for her to hold back. Weren't they working together? Want to be together? She was more than happy to fulfill their wishes. She summoned her subordinates. Cheng Linin had 4 personal maidservants since she was young: Bright Sparrow, Darkword, Guang Yao, and Yi Lai. These 4 were personally handpicked by the great high priest and had grown up with Cheng Linin. Although their talents could not compare to Cheng Linin's, they were still 1 in 100. She whispered a few orders, and Darkword and Yi Lai left to carry out her orders. Chapter 794. The second prince, Xian Tiance, had taken a fancy to an unknown concubine's daughter from the great general's residence. This matter had to be attributed to a few hedonistic sons of rich parents. That day, a few famous hedonistic sons of the imperial city saw an incomparably beautiful woman in a restaurant. Judging from her dressing, she seemed to be from a small family, so they started having romantic thoughts. That woman refused to give in no matter what, and as she stumbled, she accidentally pushed open the door of a private room. Inside the private room, the second prince and a beauty dressed in white were cuddling with each other, showing their affection for each other. There was no doubt that the onlookers made up the rest of the story. Xian Tiance and Cheng Lingyu were just chatting normally. However, rumors usually spread from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to the public. By the time everyone knew about it, even the people involved wouldn't be able to recognize themselves. The most widely circulated version in the imperial city was that the second prince had spotted the 5th miss, who was not favored, among countless gorgeous beauties, at the birthday banquet of the old madam of the Protector General's mansion. After returning home, he could not forget her and fell in love with her. In the end, he could not help but ask her out. This kind of storybook that involved the rich and powerful and had a hint of sex appeal was the most popular among the masses. The great general's residence. I didn't know that there was someone like you among my daughters. The great general, Cheng Tsugong, looked at Cheng Lingyu with a solemn expression. He had many children. Except for a few who were especially outstanding, he didn't care about the others. If it weren't for this incident, he wouldn't even have thought of this 5th daughter. Father, I met His Highness the second prince by chance, Cheng Lingyu said with a frightened look on her face. By chance? Cheng Tsugong sneered. What kind of person is the second prince? If it's really someone you don't know, can you meet him in a private room? He waved his hand to stop Cheng Lingyu, who wanted to say more. You don't have to explain anything. I'll send someone to the second prince's residence. If he's interested in you, you can go to his residence and be his concubine. If he's not. The great general's tone became extremely cold. The great general's residence doesn't need a daughter with a ruined reputation. Cheng Lingyu returned to the courtyard. When she closed the door, her face darkened. She didn't expect that something she had done so secretly would be discovered so easily. But all of this just happened to be so coincidental. Those hedonistic sons of rich parents spent all day fighting cocks and raising dogs. It was common for them to take a fancy to a beautiful woman and want to take liberties with her. Then was it really his bad luck? Recalling what her so-called father had said, Cheng Lingyu's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. There's not a single good person in this residence. All of them deserve to die. It was time for her to make some plans for herself. Although the two of them had not interacted much, Cheng Lingyu knew exactly what kind of person he was. That person was a typical example of a woman who looked like a good girl on the outside, but had a heart like the king of hell. Right now, it was still unknown whether or not he was worth saving, so he had to prepare a way out for himself. In the second prince's residence, Xian Tiance sent off the people from the general's residence. The smile on his face disappeared. You want this prince to take that woman? His voice dragged out, but the servants in the room all kept quiet out of fear. As His Highness' personal servants, they all knew that whenever His Highness spoke in such a tone, it meant that he was in a bad mood. Chapter 795. Indeed, Xian Tianche was in a bad mood. He was certain that his meeting with Cheng Lingyu had been kept a secret. It was impossible for the people on his side to betray him. Then, was this really just a coincidence? He was naturally suspicious, and what he didn't believe the most was the word coincidence. In that case, was it possible that Cheng Lingyu was the one who planned all this? Perhaps she did not want to live that kind of life in the general's mansion, and felt that she was a good shade tree? The more the second prince thought about it, the more he felt that this was very possible. Although this matter was done very secretly, and he could not find any trace of it. Thinking of this, his lips curled into a bloodthirsty smile. His original intention of abandoning Cheng Lingyu changed. Help me tell the general that I am very fond of the fifth miss of your mansion. This meant that he had agreed. How dare she scheme against me, humph. When Cheng Lingyu received the news, she was still in disbelief. Xian Tianche actually admitted to this matter? This was completely different from what she knew of him. What was he trying to do? Cheng Lingyu was not happy at all. Instead, a strong sense of vigilance rose in her heart. The servant who came to her courtyard to deliver the news was no longer as arrogant as before. His face was full of joy and enthusiasm. This attitude made Cheng Lingyu very disgusted. Her thoughts were in a mess, and she no longer put on an act. Instead, she coldly asked Xiaolian to see the guest out. The steward retreated with the same smile. After he was out of the door, his expression turned cold. She was indeed not presentable. She had not even left, but she had already shown such a face. 3 days later, Cheng Lingyu was sent to the second prince's mansion as a concubine. When Gu Xingyin received this news, she could not help but laugh. In the original plot, Cheng Lingyu did not leave the general's mansion. When she was 18 years old, she awakened her talent and was groomed by the general. Gradually, she gained his trust. The trust of the master of this mansion. This was also the biggest reason why she was able to sabotage the general's mansion and slander him. As of now, she was already considered a member of the second prince's residence. In this case, not to mention that she no longer had the advantage to do anything to the general's residence. Even if she were to expose the crimes of the general's residence once again, the higher-ups would suspect that the second prince wanted to deal with the general's residence. Furthermore, she had successfully planted a seed of doubt between Xian Tianche and Cheng Lingyu. Can the two of you still be like in the original plot, and become lovers who love each other wholeheartedly? Linine. A faint voice rang in her ears. Come here. When Gu Xingyin arrived at the main hall, the high priest was standing there waiting for her. I've told you before, don't let those mundane matters occupy your mind too much. The great consecrator turned to look at his favorite disciple. Gu Xingyin blinked and looked at him. But teacher, the second prince and my fifth sister have teamed up to plot against the general's mansion. That's where I was born. I can't just stand by and watch. The High Reverend frowned. He had never thought about this before. In his world, there was no such thing as scheming. Going against him? He could just sweep his sword over. When a person was so powerful that everyone had to look up to him, there was no longer any conspiracy that could work on him. Because even if you had 1,000 schemes, he only needed to move a finger to make all your schemes go down the drain. Chapter 796. Therefore, what he hoped for the most was for this disciple of his to become strong enough. One day, because of her existence, no one would dare to touch her family in the slightest. Seeing that her teacher was looking at her disapprovingly, Gu Xingyin giggled and walked over to hug his arm. Teacher, I promise that I'll cultivate diligently. No matter what I'm thinking about, I won't delay my cultivation progress. The high priest felt the warmth on his arm. It seemed that this disciple of his liked to be close to him more and more recently. He had even read the ancient books in the Xiantian Tower for this reason. According to the ancient books, the reason why she suddenly liked to be close to others was because she felt uneasy and indecisive. Was Linine wronged at home? Or was she frightened by the matter between the second prince and her fifth sister? Regardless of which it was, he felt pity for her. Therefore, he didn't avoid it. Instead, he let Gu Xingyin continue hugging him. By the way, teacher. Gu Xingyin suddenly remembered something. Don't spy on my whereabouts for the next few days. For someone as strong as the high priest, his divine sense was extremely powerful. If he wanted to know something, it was extremely easy. The high priest looked at her in confusion. Your disciple won't leave the Xiantian Tower for the next few days. Don't worry. I have a little secret. She raised a finger. The high priest didn't know why, but he felt a little unhappy. No matter what Lin Yin did in the past, she would never hide it from him. However, his state of mind had always been strong. This thought only lasted for a short moment. It was so short that even Gu Xingyin didn't notice it. The high priest nodded. All right, if you don't want me to know, I won't investigate. Gu Xingyin felt that there was something wrong with his words. It sounded like he was jealous. However, looking at her teacher's calm expression, she felt that she was overthinking. In the following 10 days, Gu Xingyin prepared her little secret while observing the second prince's residence. Her life in the second prince's residence wasn't as good as people thought. At first, everyone thought that since she was the first official concubine of the second prince must have treated her differently. However, after she entered the manor, the second prince continued to sleep in his own bedroom. During the day, he would go out to find his 2 or 3 good friends to chat. When he was in the mood, he would even summon 2 beauties to liven things up. In fact, the second prince had never rested in his new concubine's room. The servants of the second prince's residence, who had been observing her carefully, now understood that she was not liked by the second prince. Although he didn't know what His Highness was thinking, he still accepted this person even though he didn't like her. However, all of this had nothing to do with them as servants. They were only responsible for serving people. Cheng Lingyu's treatment had deteriorated over the past few days. It was only slightly better than when she was in the general's residence. This was because apart from Xian Tiance, she was the only one in the second prince's residence who could barely be considered half a master. Xiao Lian was furious, but Cheng Lingyu heaved a sigh of relief. If Xian Tianso had shown her more affection, she would have felt that something was wrong. It was best if Xian Tianso didn't dote on her. She also didn't want to give her body to a completely unfamiliar and emotionless man. The general's residence had originally been observing this daughter of theirs. If she was favored by the second prince, they could make use of her. However, looking at the current situation, this move was useless. Chapter 797. Gu Xingyin counted the days. It seemed that Cheng Lingyu had just celebrated her 17th birthday, so there was still a year before her 18th birthday awakening. 1 year was enough for her to do a lot of things. There was no distinction between spring, summer, autumn, and winter in the Xiantian Tower. It was the most comfortable temperature all year round because the high priest had personally set up a thermostatic array, so that his little disciple could have a happy life. That night, he received a voice transmission from his little disciple. Teacher, come to the observatory behind the main hall. He heard the excitement and anticipation in Lin Yin's voice and his heart skipped a beat. His figure flashed and he appeared beside Gu Xingyin. This is... He looked at the things in front of him, and was puzzled for a moment. There was a square table in front of him with several dishes on it. They all looked very good. One of the bowls was covered with a lid, so he couldn't see what was inside. Teacher, have you forgotten? You told me what day it is today. Gu Xingyin looked at him with a smile. Today? The high priest counted the days and looked at Gu Xingyin with a warm gaze. It's good that you still remember. Gu Xingyin tilted her head and smiled. Teacher, open it. She pointed to the covered bowl. The high priest opened the lid with a glance, and a thick fragrance wafted out. It was a bowl of noodles. The thin noodles were like silver threads. The soup was made of an unknown material, and there was no color. It looked like a bowl of plain noodles, but the fragrance couldn't lie. Gu Xingyin said, This is the longevity noodles I made for you. I heard that ordinary people eat longevity noodles like this on their birthdays. It means longevity and health. After saying this, she was a little embarrassed. I know that you don't lack these things, but I didn't know. A hand fell on the top of her head. The high priest gently rubbed her hair as if comforting her. No, Lin Yin, I'm very happy. There seemed to be something warm flowing in his chest. No one had ever done this for him. Although he didn't care about these things at this moment, The feelings from this little disciple still made his heart, which hadn't fluctuated for a long time, happy. Gu Xingyin pulled down the hand on her head and asked him to sit down. She smiled and looked at him. Teacher, hurry up and eat. It's going to get cold. The high priest picked up his chopsticks and picked up a stick. Oh right. The whole bowl is made of noodles. Teacher, you can't bite it off. You have to finish it in one go. When he raised his head and saw his disciple looking at him expectantly, the high priest couldn't help but smile. All right. With that, he lowered his head and began to eat bit by bit. Gu Xingyin was swayed by his smile. Not only her, but in Cheng Linin's memory, she had never seen this teacher smile. The moon tonight was very big, and the Xiantian Tower was very high. They were sitting on the highest stargazing platform of the Xiantian Tower. The huge moon seemed to be within reach. Gu Xingyin recalled the high priest's fleeting smile. The moon was behind him, but it only served as a foil to him. There was a bandit gentleman who was like carved jade. Her heart thumped heavily. She quickly picked up the wine beside her, and drank a cup to cover up her gaffe. He was such a perfect and powerful man, and he was also her lover. It was really hard for her to hold back those restless thoughts. There weren't many noodles. After the high priest finished eating, he raised his head. He hadn't eaten any grains for many years, but he had to admit that this bowl of noodles tasted very good. Lin Ying didn't make a sound. If he hadn't sensed that she was sitting in front of him, the high priest would have thought that she had left. When he raised his head, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 798. He saw that the girl's cheeks were red, and she was looking at him drunkenly with her chin propped up. The head consecrator glanced at the empty wine cup in front of her, and understood what was going on. This wine was clearly taken out by Lin Ying from the Xiantian Tower's storeroom. Anything that the head consecrator put into the storeroom was definitely good stuff. In other words, anything that could be given to the head consecrator was definitely not bad. This wine was called Drunken Immortal Rain. Although its name sounded poetic, it was actually a first-class liquor. Moreover, this wine wasn't the kind that was strong when it entered the mouth. On the contrary, it was mellow and gentle when it entered the mouth. It tasted similar to ordinary fruit wine, but it had the strongest aftertaste. Even those who claimed to never get drunk after 1,000 cups didn't dare to drink 3 cups in a row. The head consecrator glanced at the amount of wine in the pot, and understood that this girl definitely drank more than 3 cups. He felt a bit helpless, but he wasn't too worried. Although the drunken immortal rain was strong, it didn't affect the body. Once she had a good sleep, she would be fine when she woke up. However, this wine had a special characteristic. It could evoke a person's deepest desires. In other words, many things that they didn't dare to say or do normally couldn't be hidden after drinking this wine. The head consecrator wasn't willing to reveal his disciples' inner secrets. He got up and wanted to bring her down to rest. However, who knew that Gu Xingyin would raise her head and look at the head consecrator with a smile. "Teacher, you're really good-looking," she said with a grin. The head consecrator's expression didn't change. If someone else dared to speak to him in such a teasing tone, he definitely wouldn't let them off easily. However, the person who spoke was Lin Ying. He only felt a sense of closeness. "You're drunk." He calmly stated this fact. Gu Xingyin felt her mind was extremely clear. "I'm not drunk. I specially came today to celebrate teacher's birthday. I personally made these dishes. Are they delicious?" The head consecrator's expression changed slightly. This child had grown up with him. No one knew better than him whether she knew how to cook or not. So, was this the little secret she spoke of a while ago? Thinking of this, the head consecrator's mood suddenly became better. His gentle gaze swept across the delicate-looking dishes and he nodded. "I like it very much." Gu Xingyin was visibly happy. She looked at the high priest's flawless face up close and blurted out, "Teacher, I have something to tell you." The high priest was about to get up, but when he heard her, he turned to look at her. Gu Xingyin looked at her without blinking and said in a clear voice, "Teacher, I like you." The high priest paused. He looked at his little disciple in astonishment. What did she just say? As if she knew what he was thinking, Gu Xingyin repeated her words one by one. "Teacher, I like you." The great consecrator wanted to use the excuse of a drunken slip of the tongue to persuade himself, but the drunken immortal downpour's characteristics were there, and he couldn't deceive himself. The child that she had raised herself actually had such thoughts about her? The high priest had never thought of such a problem. He felt that he should be disgusted, but he wasn't. In the face of his little disciple's words, he only felt that there was something wrong. Yes, this wasn't right. He slowly turned his face. After Gu Xingyin said that sentence, she kept staring at his face. When she saw his expression this time, her heart sank. She thought that she already knew the answer. Chapter 799. The high priest's tone was very gentle, but Gu Xingyin had a bad feeling. "Lenin, you're drunk." He repeated this sentence again. Gu Xingyin felt that she had completely let go of herself. "Teacher, you actually know if I'm speaking the truth or if I'm drunk, right?" The high priest was silent for a moment, then flicked his sleeves. Gu Xingyin only felt her vision darken, as she fell into a familiar embrace. The high priest looked at his little disciple lying in the crook of his arm, and sighed inwardly. He reached out a finger and gently tapped Gu Xingyin's forehead. Some things were better forgotten. Gu Xingyin, who was sound asleep, frowned uncomfortably and subconsciously snuggled into this familiar and warm embrace. The high priest carried her back to the room and carefully covered her with a blanket. Then, he returned to the stargazing platform. He looked at the full moon and slowly, one bite at a time, finished everything on the table. The next day, Gu Xingyin woke up feeling refreshed. One of the obvious benefits of a top-grade wine like the drunken immortal rain was that there wouldn't be any side effects after getting drunk. But she rubbed her forehead. She had clearly celebrated her teacher's birthday last night, but why couldn't she remember anything now? She really shouldn't drink too much. She asked the maids to prepare hot water. After a good bath, she went to the main hall. The high priest was still sitting on the white jade platform. He had his own room, but every time Gu Xingyin saw him, it was in the main hall. "Teacher." Gu Xingyin bowed. The high priest asked, "You're awake. Do you feel unwell?" Gu Xingyin shook her head and asked again. "I drank too much last night. I didn't do anything out of line, right?" The high priest's expression didn't change. "You were very obedient when you were drunk. You fell asleep immediately." Obedient? Did her teacher still think of her as a child? Gu Xingyin was relieved. It was fine as long as she didn't make a fool of herself. However, the system didn't remind him, so it seemed like nothing had happened. Gu Xingyin put this matter aside. Now, she had to start preparing for something else. At the end of the year, it would be her 18th birthday. After that, the Young King competition that was held once every 5 years in the Tianxian continent would begin. Being the #1 talent in the Tianxian land, how could Cheng Lining not participate in such a pageant? If Cheng Lingyu hadn't interfered, Cheng Lining's legendary journey would have started here. The new king competition was held once every 5 years, and the various empires would take turns to host it. This time, it was the Vermilion Bird Empire's turn. The Vermilion Bird Empire was located in the southernmost part of the continent. The empire worshipped the Vermilion Bird, the divine beast that controlled the flames of the south. Hence, it was called the Vermilion Bird Empire. The Vermilion Bird Empire and the Tianxian Empire were separated by a vast desert. This meant that Gu Xingyin would not be able to see the head priest for at least a year after the Young King competition. By the time she returned, Cheng Lingyu would have already awakened her talent. She went to see the head priest for this, hoping that he could keep an eye on Cheng Lingyu while she was away from the Tianxian Empire. The high priest frowned. "That's so troublesome. Why don't I just take care of it for you?" Gu Xingyin paused and asked, "Teacher, can you erase the soul that has taken over my 5th sister without harming her?" The high priest nodded. "I can try." Gu Xingyin thought for a moment. "Not now. I'll have to trouble you to expel this person from my 5th sister's body in the near future." The high priest was puzzled as to why Lin didn't want him to do it now. However, he never cared about this kind of thing, so he didn't ask. Chapter 800. Cheng Lingyu convinced the second prince to take her to the Vermilion Bird Empire. Gu Xingyin had to admire Cheng Lingyu's ability to convince the second prince to take her with him under such circumstances. However, having Cheng Lingyu under her nose was a good thing for her. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was the day of departure. The night before departure, Gu Xingyin came to bid farewell to the head priest. "Teacher, I won't be back for many days. Please take care of yourself." She bowed to the head priest. The head priest looked at her and said gently, "You don't have to worry about me. You, on the other hand, should be careful of your own safety." Gu Xingyin nodded in agreement. She suddenly raised her head and said softly, "Teacher, I can't bear to part with you." The high priest's expression softened. He immediately thought of that night when his little disciple had drunk the immortal rain wine and softly said to him, "I like you." In the end, he said calmly, "You're already an adult. There will be times when you'll be alone." Gu Xingyin took a closer look at his expression and sighed inwardly. He then took his leave. Behind her, the palace door closed silently. The next day, Gu Xingyin came to the palace. Accompanying her were 9 of the most famous young masters of the Tianqian dynasty. The second prince was among them. Seeing her arrival, everyone except the second prince, Xian Tiance, came forward to greet her. The emperor praised everyone and rewarded them with countless treasures. Then, the 10 of them set off for the Vermilion Bird Empire under the protection of a few masters of the Tianqian dynasty. During the journey, Gu Xingyin took the time to see Cheng Lingyu, who had set off with the second prince. She already knew why Cheng Lingyu insisted on coming. She didn't know where she had heard the rumor, but it was said that among the rewards of the Young King competition, there was an item called the Xian Pill. Taking this pill could stimulate one's potential to the greatest extent. It was very likely that it could allow a person who was born without Xian Qi to be qualified to cultivate Xian Qi. Although it was equally dangerous, Cheng Lingyu wanted to give it a try. If she wanted to obtain the Xian summoning pill, she would definitely not go through the proper channels. Such a precious item. Cheng Lingyu would not have the extravagant hope that the victor would use it on her. That's right. What she wanted to do was steal. Although Gu Xingyin didn't know where this woman got the confidence to steal such a precious elixir under the protection of so many experts, he didn't know where she got her confidence from. In fact, if Cheng Lingyu had come over and talked to her, she would have been very happy to give her the mysterious summoning pill. Gu Xingyin intended to give her a present. Gu Xingyin wanted to let her have everything, and then take everything she stole with his own hands. After a month, the people from the mysterious Heaven Empire finally arrived at the territory of the Vermilion Bird Empire. As the strongest empire in the profound sky continent, Gu Xingyin's group was undoubtedly treated with utmost respect. Everything was perfect, except for someone who was especially passionate. "Miss Linyin, our Vermilion Bird City has many beautiful areas. I wonder if this little king has the honor of inviting Miss to enjoy them together?" This handsome man with a warm smile on his face was the youngest brother of the current emperor of the Vermilion Bird Empire, Lai Xiao. From the first time he saw Gu Xingyin, he was stunned by her beauty. He didn't hide his love for Gu Xingyin at all, and reported to the Tianqian Empire's embassy every day without fail. Chapter 801. Gu Xingyin was almost worn out by him. "Didn't you say he was annoying? His eyes clearly showed his admiration and adoration for you. But he never crossed the line. Every time, he would step on the boundaries that she could accept. And he didn't just invite Gu Xingyin alone. Just like now, even if everyone knew that his goal was Gu Xingyin, he didn't forget to consider the feelings of others. Our Vermilion Bird City has a Xuanhua cave. It is rumored that there is a fire seed left behind by the Vermilion Bird hidden underground. When a martial artist is inside, their cultivation speed will increase by a lot." When he said this, everyone's eyes lit up. Such an obvious scheme, but Gu Xingyin couldn't refuse. This was because everyone else had an eager expression on their faces, while Lai Xiao was looking at him eagerly. Moreover, she was a bit curious about such a place. She nodded. Lai Xiao laughed heartily and didn't waste any more words. He personally led the way for everyone. He told everyone without reservation because the Vermilion Bird Empire's Xuanhua Cave wasn't a secret to begin with, and it had a limited effect on cultivation. Normal martial artists would only have a certain effect on their first try. After that, their strength wouldn't increase at all. Miss Linine, it is spring now, and there are many tourists. To think that such a beautiful girl like you will attract the attention of many young masters. Lai Xiao exclaimed. His tone was straightforward, and his words were full of praise. Gu Xingyin could only smile faintly. Your Highness is too kind. So when the head consecrator wanted to see what his little disciple was doing, his divine sense saw this scene. She was fighting with a handsome man in a red robe on the busy street. The two seemed to be very close, and Linine even showed him a very happy smile. The head consecrator didn't have any impression of this person. Judging from his clothes, he wasn't from the Tianxian kingdom. Who was he? The head consecrator only felt that the scene of the two smiling at each other was inexplicably dazzling. The undisguised adoration in the man's eyes made him even more annoyed. He had romantic feelings for Linine. Then what about Linine? The head consecrator carefully looked at his disciple and found that she didn't reject this man's closeness. Linine had lived in the Tianxian Tower with him for the past 18 years. She rarely interacted with outsiders, especially men. This man's status wasn't low, and his looks were barely decent. He also looked like a talkative person. Didn't he see that the usually taciturn Linine was so happy and smiled at him? Linine was so innocent, she couldn't have been deceived? The head consecrator started to worry for his little disciple. No. The next moment, the head consecrator suddenly, just now, there was a moment of confusion in his state of mind when he saw Linine smiling at that person. Since when did she have such a huge influence on his thoughts? His consecrator. Consecrator? The head consecrator withdrew his divine sense. For the first time, he didn't meditate on the white jade platform. Instead, he quietly pondered. Gu Xingyin seemed to sense something. She raised her head and looked at the sky with some confusion. What's wrong? Lai Xiao saw her suddenly raise her head and asked. Gu Xingyin shook her head and didn't say anything. Maybe it was an illusion. Chapter 802. When she returned to her room that night, the system reminded Gu Xingyin, the poison that Cheng Lingyue put into Cheng Lingyue's body has begun to take effect. It had to be said that Cheng Lingyue was a ruthless and careful person. Cheng Lingyue had bullied her, so she had sucked the poison into Cheng Lingyue's body with a tug. It had been a few months since then, and she had already entered the second prince's residence. Even if Cheng Lingyue were to die from the poison now, no one would bully her. Fortunately, before she left, she had instructed her confidant in Tianxian continent. This is the antidote. When Cheng Lingyue's poison takes effect, cure her of it. Remember, give her the antidote only after she has tasted the bitter fruit. Her fourth sister's actions were indeed a little too much. This time, she would let her suffer a little to temper her character. Heeding her master's instructions, Secret Word did not give Cheng Lingyue the antidote immediately after the poison took effect. Instead, after she had invited a few physicians, all of whom said that they were powerless and that she would rather die than suffer for a few days, Secret Word snuck into her courtyard one night and placed a letter and a bottle of antidote on the table. The letter clearly stated that this was her punishment for her unforgiving mouth, her tendency to take advantage of others, and her haggling over every little thing. This time, she would be spared. If there was a next time, no one would save her. After the scare, Cheng Lingyue's character actually changed. Although she did not become as timid and cowardly as Cheng Lingyue in the past, she became more cautious in her words and actions. Cheng Lingyue did not know this. In her heart, Cheng Lingyue was already a dead person. She was currently in her room, reading a blurry parchment scroll. She had come across it by chance in an ancient book in the second prince's residence, and it recorded information related to possession. Hesitant possession had always been a very good thing, so very few people were interested in it. She slowly read through the content on it. These days she often had a dream at night. In the dream she was in a pitch-black place, and her body was an illusion, emitting a faint glow. Not far in front of her, there was a similar illusion lying quietly in mid-air, with the appearance of Cheng Lingyue. At first, she didn't know what it meant until she read the ancient books. Through her investigation, she discovered that she had not completely obtained a new life. The place she went to in her dream was the sea of consciousness of this body. Her soul came to this body, but the soul of the original owner, Cheng Lingyu, didn't disappear. She just fell into a deep sleep. Now, she frequently dreamed of this scene because Cheng Lingyu's soul was gradually getting stronger. When Cheng Lingyu woke up, it would be the time when she would be expelled from this body. How could she allow such a thing to happen? To Cheng Ling, coming to this alternate world after death was a gift from the heavens. Since she had come back to life in Cheng Lingyu's body, she was now Cheng Lingyu. As for the original Cheng Lingyu, since you've been asleep for so long, there's no need for you to wake up. Just stay asleep forever. This sheepskin scroll recorded how to expel a soul from a body. In fact, it was a complete method of possession. However, Cheng Ling had already accidentally completed the most difficult task, which was to place her soul into the body. Now she only had one step left, and that was how to expel the original owner's soul and truly obtain this body. Chapter 803. She did not have any celestial qi in her body. Even if there was a method written on the parchment, it would not be easy for her. However, the mystic summoning pill gave her hope. It was rumored that the mystic summoning pill could fully stimulate a person's potential, and even awaken the thinnest celestial qi in the body. This process was obviously very painful. And this was the time when a person's consciousness was at its weakest. To Cheng Ling, this was the best opportunity. She could use this opportunity to completely remove Cheng Lingyu's soul. She had complete confidence that a weak and self-abased soul would not be her match. Gu Xingyin did not know what she was thinking, but she knew what Cheng Lingyu was looking at through the system. Therefore, she could roughly guess Cheng Ling's motive. It seemed that Cheng Ling had discovered that Cheng Lingyu's soul had not disappeared. With her ruthless temperament that had been honed from her many years as a mercenary, it wasn't strange for her to want to kill someone to the last one. Since Cheng Ling was so ruthless, Gu Xingyin felt even less burdened by this matter. As Gu Xingyin was thinking about Cheng Lingyu, she did not know that in the distant Tianxian continent, on the Xiantian Tower, someone quietly opened his eyes and disappeared from the white jade stage. As the Young King competition drew closer, Gu Xingyin finally had an excuse to reject Lai Xiao's invitation. She was busy cultivating and did not have time. Lai Xiao also knew the importance of this competition, and tactfully did not disturb her. Finally, the day of the competition arrived. When Gu Xingyin followed the rest of the participants from the Tianxian continent out of the embassy, there was already a crowd of onlookers outside. Most of these people did not have the right to enter the competition grounds, and could only see the continent's youngest and strongest warrior. Gu Xingyin saw a man in white in the middle of the crowd. His face was very ordinary, the kind that could not be found in the crowd. The white clothes on him were also made of the most ordinary material. His entire person was very inconspicuous. However, Gu Xingyin lowered her head to hide her loss of composure. Why was Master here? And in disguise? The high priest's disguise was, of course, flawless. But to Gu Xingyin, no matter how that person tried to disguise himself, the lotus fragrance that accompanied his soul to every world could not be concealed. By the time Gu Xingyin calmed down and looked back, there was no trace of that person. What she didn't know was that the high priest was actually still there. He was just hiding his figure. He had just felt that his little disciple's aura had suddenly become chaotic, and he thought that she had discovered him. But with her cultivation level, this was something that was simply impossible to happen. The great consecrator saw the flamboyant red-robed man not far away from him. Could it be that Lin Yin's emotions were fluctuating because of him? When he thought of this, the high priest snorted coldly in his heart. Lai Xiao, who was watching his sweetheart leave, suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He raised his head and looked at the bright sun in the sky, wondering if there was something wrong with his body. He shook his head to get rid of the thought. Young Mistress Lin Yin was already preparing to leave for the competition grounds. He had to hurry over as well. He definitely could not miss Lin Yin's entrance. He left in the company of his servants. Chapter 804. Thank you for letting me win. Gu Xingyin cupped her fists elegantly and said to the person opposite her. The man opposite her got up and admitted defeat to Gu Xingyin. Thank you for going easy on me. The other party's strength was not on the same level as his. The surrounding audience had long lost their previous excitement. There was no other reason. They were already numb from the shock of this girl from the Tianxian kingdom. From the beginning, she had been overwhelming with her strength. From the preliminary selections to the rotation matches, and now to the semifinals. She was not the only one who had won all the matches, but she was the only one who looked much stronger than her opponents. None of her opponents could last more than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. No matter how strong her opponent was, this girl always had a relaxed look on her face. Everyone could see that she was not using her full strength. If a person was slightly stronger than others, they might be envied by others. But when she was many times stronger than others, so strong that you had to look up to her, you would not even be jealous. Now, others felt that way about Gu Xingyin. Originally, the young warriors who could participate in the Young King competition were already the strongest young warriors in each kingdom. In the eyes of ordinary people, they were already unreachable. However, such strong warriors were unable to fight back in front of this girl. In the past, they had only heard that her talent was determined by her Xiantian mystic qi. She was the personal disciple of the most mysterious warrior in the Tianxian continent. Everyone only thought that these two titles sounded very powerful, but they had never thought about the meaning behind them. Until today, Gu Xingyin used her strength to prove that these were not just two titles. Beneath these two titles was absolute strength that could crush anyone. It was too shocking. Lai Xiao looked dazzlingly at the high-spirited girl in red. His heart was burning. He had never clearly understood what kind of girl he had fallen in love with. She was different from others. She was one of a kind. He might not even be worthy of her. But Lai Xiao had no intention of backing down. He looked at Gu Xingyin in the arena with a burning gaze and said softly, "I must have such a peerless girl." His words were so soft that even the people sitting next to him did not hear them. However, a certain white-robed man who had been paying attention to him with a strand of his divine sense heard it. His face darkened when he heard this. As a result, Lord Lai Xiao once again felt a chill down his spine when the sun was high in the sky. He shivered and put away his thoughts. Once again, he looked silently at the cloudless sky. Could it be that he was really sick? Forget it. After the competition, he did not look for Miss Lin Yin. He should go find a doctor first. Sensing that the man's gaze was no longer fixed on Gu Xingyin, the man in white nodded in satisfaction. He was sitting right in the middle of the field. It was obvious that this young man was looking for a seat in the competition, but the seats around him were all empty. This was really surprising. However, the most surprising thing was that although no one was sitting next to him, no one else found it strange. If someone wanted to pass by, they would subconsciously go around this position as if it did not exist. Chapter 805. The high priest stared at his little disciple in a daze. Lin Yin always wore an obedient smile in front of him. She looked so dependent on him, as if she hadn't grown up yet. He never knew that his little disciple, who had always been a little girl in his eyes, would have such a side to her. She stood on the field and defeated her opponents one by one. She wasn't shy in the face of everyone's cheers and praises. She was a high-spirited and dazzling girl. She was the disciple he had taught since she was a child. She was his. Lin Yin. The high priest felt something warm flowing in his heart. He reached out his hand to cover his chest, where his heart was beating at a speed that was not normal. He knew who his heart was beating for. So he wasn't a cold-hearted person after all. His heart didn't beat because he had never met anyone who could make him move. The high priest looked at Gu Xingyin in the field. His eyes gradually became deep. A smile also appeared on his face. Because of this smile, his ordinary face seemed to have become very moving. Unfortunately, no one was able to appreciate this scene. There was another person who was also looking at Gu Xingyin with a burning gaze. Cheng Lingyu, who was lucky enough to be here to watch the competition thanks to the second prince. Looking at Gu Xingyin, who was enjoying the admiration of everyone in the field, Cheng Lingyu felt her blood boiling. Yes, that's right. That's it. It was this kind of life that she had been pursuing. She wanted to be powerful and live in the shock and admiration of everyone. She wanted to create a legend. She even thought that it would be great if she had transmigrated into Cheng Linin's body. In that case, she wouldn't have to spend so much effort to plan for herself. She could easily get everything she wanted. The more she thought about it, the more excited she became. But in the end, reason calmed her down. That was impossible. Not to mention that Cheng Linin was a powerful cultivator. She might not be able to defeat her in terms of soul strength. It was already a gift from the heavens that she had a chance to start over. Desire was endless. Why should she be greedy? Cheng Lingyu suppressed the wild thoughts in her mind and loosened her palm, which was hurt by her nails. What about Cheng Linin? When he successfully obtained the profound summoning pill, he would be qualified to cultivate and gain control of this body. She didn't believe that she was inferior to anyone. When the time came, he, who had taken over Cheng Lingyu's body, would naturally help her settle all the grudges in the past, including the general's residence and those who had looked down on her. She didn't want to admit that she was the one who had taken Cheng Lingyu's body, and that she should be the person that Cheng Lingyu hated the most. Cheng Lingyu was such a coward. She would only be bullied by others and live a humble and cowardly life. Perhaps her arrival would be her relief. Only by taking control of this body could she help Cheng Lingyu take revenge on those who had hurt her. Only then could Cheng Lingyu's name become a dazzling legend. Cheng Lingyu should be thanking her instead. If Gu Xingyin heard such shameless words, she would probably slap his face mercilessly. Saying so much was just an excuse for his own selfishness. You took Cheng Lingyu's body and everything from her. How dare you say that she should thank you? There was a saying that went like this: a shameless person is invincible. Chapter 806. The last round of the Young King tournament. Her opponent was very strong. Of course, it was impossible for anyone who could reach this stage to be weak. However, he was still no match for Gu Xingyin. I've lost. Her opponent was a swordsman. His person was like his sword, silent and determined. Only when he drew his sword would one feel the chilling murderous intent that followed him like a shadow. He admitted defeat without any hesitation. A person like him would not waste his time on such meaningless things. If he had the time, he would rather practice his swordsmanship. As everyone expected, Gu Xingyin took first place in the tournament and became the undisputed king of the younger generation of martial artists in the Tianxian continent. The moment the results were announced, the Tianxian continent used a precious communication stone to send the good news back to the Tianxian continent. What awaited the warriors who returned to the empire was the grandest welcome ceremony. After the award ceremony, the delegation from the Tianxian continent did not linger in the Vermilion Bird Empire for long. Under the reluctant gaze of the fierce Owl King, Gu Xingyin stepped on the road back home. In the carriage, Gu Xingyin was playing with an exquisite white jade bottle. Inside the bottle was the mystical summoning pill that Cheng Lingyu could not forget. She knew that Cheng Lingyu was trying to get her hands on this bottle of pills. She, too, was thinking of how to let Cheng Lingyu get her hands on this bottle of pills. She would treat it as a gift to the real Cheng Lingyu. The effects of the mystical summoning pill were terrifying. It could completely cleanse one's muscles, marrow, and bones. Ordinary people could not bear such pain. Among the cases of people who failed to awaken after taking the mystical summoning pill, at least 30% of them failed because they could not bear the pain. If it was the real Cheng Lingyu, she would not be able to bear the pain. But Cheng Ling was different. For the sake of becoming stronger, she was willing to do anything. Her goal was to expel Cheng Lingyu when her soul was at its weakest, the moment of awakening. Coincidentally, Gu Xingyin had the same idea. Expel her from Cheng Lingyu's body when her soul was at its weakest. Give him a taste of his own medicine. No one had wronged anyone. As Gu Xingyin was thinking, a familiar aura appeared beside her. She wasn't surprised at all. She turned her head and smiled. Teacher. The High Consecrator was surprised. How did you know it was me? Gu Xingyin blinked. No matter what you look like, I'll be able to recognize you at a glance. The High Consecrator admitted that he was overjoyed by these words. Close your eyes, he said. Gu Xingyin closed her eyes without hesitation. Seeing that she didn't hesitate at all in response to his words, and didn't even put up any defenses, exposing all her vital points to him, the High Priest's eyes warmed. He gently reached out a finger and tapped on Gu Xingyin's forehead. The sealed memories of that night flooded into Gu Xingyin's mind. So, I actually confessed to her so directly when I was drunk? Gu Xingyin opened her eyes with some hesitation and looked at the high consecrator, who had returned to his original appearance. She could totally understand why her teacher sealed her memories. This way they could avoid awkwardness and discomfort. But now why did he suddenly release the seal? Could it be that after a period of time, they would no longer be awkward? Could it be? Gu Xingyin widened her eyes. Chapter 807. Seeing the little girl in front of him staring at him in a daze, the high priest felt very happy. Others could only see her commanding and high-spirited appearance. Only he could see her acting coquettishly and adorably like a little girl. This was his Linine. Do you still remember what you said that night? The high priest asked. Gu Xingyin couldn't react and nodded blankly. What was going on? Did teacher suddenly become enlightened? Then I will respond to you. I also like you. The head consecrator continued to speak in an indifferent tone. His words were not indifferent at all. Gu Xingyin blinked, then blinked hard. It wasn't an illusion. Her own teacher really became enlightened just like that. The person she liked had accepted her confession. What should she do? Gu Xingyin wanted to hurry up and do it. A bright smile suddenly blossomed on her face, which was still a little dazed. Then she threw herself forward and landed in the high priest's arms. The high priest instinctively reached out his hand to catch her. Then he felt something warm and wet on his face. It was a kiss. This passionate and open-minded little disciple actually kissed him without hesitation. He was a little surprised, but didn't find it hard to accept. However, there were some things that needed to be clarified first. That prince of the Vermilion Bird Empire. What's your relationship with him? He was a little unhappy when he said this, but he hid it well. Lai Xiao. Gu Xingyin was confused. What relationship did Lai Xiao have with her? She thought for a moment and finally understood what the teacher meant. Was the teacher jealous? She was secretly happy, but on the surface she said righteously, "There's absolutely nothing between him and me." I believe you. The high priest knew in his heart that Linine didn't have any feelings for that man. After all, his status wasn't as high as his looks weren't as outstanding, and his strength wasn't as strong. In terms of feelings, he couldn't compare to the 10 years of intimacy he had with Linine. No matter how he looked at it, Linine wouldn't like someone else over him. The confident great consecrator thought so. However, there were some words that he still wanted to hear from the mouth of his beloved. The two of them enjoyed each other's company for a while before the high priest finally got down to business. I saw you holding this little bottle for a long time. Is there something on your mind? He asked. Gu Xingyin nodded and told him about Cheng Lingyu's plan as well as his own. She wasn't willing to hide her true nature in front of the high priest. The two of them were going to spend a lifetime together. Even if she pretended to be pure and innocent now, she couldn't pretend for a lifetime. Even if she didn't say that she was too tired, it was also a sign of distrust. Moreover, she was confident that this man would not care about this. As expected, the high consecrator didn't point out anything wrong with her actions. He only asked, "So what you're worried about now is how to let Cheng Lingyu get this thing?" Gu Xingyin nodded. The high priest's tone was calm. "That's very simple." He said a few words to Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up and she nodded. The carriages were slowly moving forward. At this moment, a masked figure suddenly rushed out of the forest on the side and attacked Cheng Lingyu's carriage. Chapter 808. The carriage that Gu Xingyin was in was instantly blown apart by the palm wind. Everyone only saw a red figure fly out of the carriage and chase after the white figure. In the blink of an eye, the red figure disappeared without a trace. Hurry up and chase after her. The experts leading the team were anxious. Cheng Linyin was now a precious treasure. Not to mention what it meant to be the champion of the Young King tournament. Just her identity was enough for them to not let their guard down. If something happened to her while she was under their protection, who would be able to bear the responsibility if the head consecrator pursued the matter? Everyone else also got out of their carriages. The moment Cheng Lingyu got out of the carriage, she saw a familiar jade bottle not far away. Wasn't this the mystic summoning pill? It seemed that Cheng Lingyu had this item on her, and had accidentally dropped it when she was fighting with the white figure. She really didn't need to do anything to get it. Cheng Lingyu quickly picked up the item, and put it in her sleeve. Then, like everyone else, she revealed a worried expression. However, just as the experts in the team chased after her, they saw Gu Xingyin coming back alone. Her face was a little pale. It was obvious that she was injured. That person was too fast. I couldn't catch up to him. She looked tired. Everyone asked her how she was. Gu Xingyin shook her head. It's just a minor injury. I have my own healing pills. I'll be fine after resting for a while. There was no lack of empty carriages in the team. Soon, Gu Xingyin boarded a new carriage. The team strengthened their security and set off again. Gu Xingyin was also exempted from all disturbances due to her injury. The moment she entered the carriage, the weakness on her face disappeared without a trace. A certain man was already sitting inside. Teacher, you're so fast. The head consecrator glanced at her. You can't find me with just these few people. After saying this, he frowned. The Tianxian Empire is too much. Did they only send these few people to protect you? If you encounter a true expert, won't you be in danger? Gu Xingyin was silent for a moment. These elders were already the top experts in the Tianxian Empire. So in her teacher's eyes, they weren't even true experts? What were the standards of a teacher? If it were him, then indeed, there would not be many elite warriors in the entire Tianxian land that he could bring out. That afternoon, Gu Xingyin, who was recuperating from her injuries, walked out of the carriage with a pale face. She found the elders in charge of protecting them, and seemed to have said something to them. The faces of the elders turned solemn. In the end, they could only shake their heads helplessly. Cheng Lingyu watched and knew that Cheng Lingyin had most likely discovered that the black summoning pill was gone. At this time, everyone would definitely think that the profound summoning pill had been taken away by the white-clothed man who had suddenly attacked them, and no one would trace it back to the convoy. She looked at Gu Xingyin's gloomy expression as she got off the carriage. She only felt happy in her heart. So what if you obtained the profound summoning pill? In the end, wasn't it all for the benefit of others? For the rest of the journey, nothing happened, and the group successfully returned to Tianxian Empire. As expected, the Emperor of Tianxian Empire was extremely happy this time. He even personally came to the city gates to congratulate the warriors who had returned with glory. Among them, the one who received the most attention was undoubtedly Gu Xingyin. The palace even held a grand celebration banquet for her. The banquet had just ended when Gu Xingyin asked to leave. The emperor wanted to persuade her to stay, but Gu Xingyin could only use the high priestess. The high priestess name was indeed useful. The emperor didn't dare to stop her. Gu Xingyin smoothly left the palace and returned to the Xiantian Tower. There were still people waiting for her there. Chapter 809. The first thing Cheng Lingyu did when she returned to the second prince's residence was to find out how to take the pill, and what preparations she needed to make. Fortunately, the second prince didn't care about her at all. The servants in the residence also knew that this master wasn't favored, and didn't have any hobbies other than reading books. Therefore no one cared about her. Cheng Lingyu flipped through several ancient books, which all said that the pill could be taken directly, and the effect was very fast. The result could be seen in one night, whether it was a success or a failure. However, the effect of the pill was very strong. When it took effect, it would be very painful. Moreover, it couldn't be disturbed, so it was best to find a quiet environment. A quiet environment? Then it was impossible to go to the second prince's residence. Cheng Lingyu found a time and told the housekeeper that she wanted to go to a villa on the outskirts of the city to relax for a while. When she said this, her tone was very sad. The housekeeper remembered that the second prince had taken a fancy to a flower girl in Zuyu brothel. It seemed that she was unhappy. Previously, the second prince had told the housekeeper to take care of everything in the backyard if it wasn't important. The housekeeper didn't inform the second prince, and only ordered a few good guards to follow her to the villa to protect Cheng Lingyu's safety. Chung Lingyu successfully made her way to the secluded courtyard. Because she was a female, the guards only waited outside the courtyard and didn't come in. It was very convenient. She told them in advance that she would wake up late in the morning and asked them not to disturb her. The guards all said they understood. That night, Chung Lingyu sat on the bed and looked at the jade bottle for a long time. Finally, she pulled out the jade stopper and took out a round, jade-colored pill. After looking at it for a while, she put it into her mouth without hesitation. At first, she didn't feel anything. Slowly, from her dantian, it began to heat up. The heat wasn't obvious at first, but then it became heavier and heavier. It even reached the point of burning, and then it spread throughout her body. There seemed to be a boom sound, as if some switch had been turned on in her body. Her entire body, from head to toe, whether it was her internal organs, skin, or even a strand of hair, she felt as if she had been scalded. Pain. The extreme pain spread throughout her body, as if there were countless blades cutting her body under her skin. Chung Lingyu knew that this was the process of reshaping her bone structure. She couldn't help but groan. Back when she was still the queen of mercenaries, she had been plotted against and hunted down for 7 days and 7 nights. The gunshot wound on her calf hadn't been treated in time, and she hadn't even frowned when it was red and swollen. That little bit of pain was nothing compared to what he was feeling now. Her consciousness was already a little dizzy from the pain. Realizing this, she suddenly gathered her remaining strength without hesitation and fiercely bit the tip of her tongue. It was just an increase in pain, but this action allowed her to regain a trace of clarity. He couldn't fall asleep. Otherwise, he might fall asleep forever. She secretly cheered herself on. She had sacrificed so much, planned for so long, and finally saw a little hope of success. How could she allow herself to kneel at this last step? Chapter 8:10. She didn't know how much time had passed, but Chung Lingyu's consciousness was in a muddled state. The only thing that kept her going was the stubbornness in her heart. She wanted to become stronger. She wanted to be above all others. It was this stubbornness that kept her from sinking into the endless pain. Until the first rays of the morning sun shone on her through the tightly shut window. That beam of light seemed to have magical powers. Chung Lingyu only felt a cooling sensation slowly spreading from her dantian. Wherever that cooling sensation flowed, the burning sensation and the tearing pain were gradually alleviated. Her weak and powerless body was slowly being filled with strength. She was overjoyed. She knew that she had succeeded. She sat up with difficulty. This simple action exhausted the little bit of strength she had just recovered. Chung Lingyu positioned herself in a posture with her palms facing the sky. She followed the method described on the parchment, and slowly sensed the subtle celestial qi in her body. She was waiting. She was waiting for the cool sensation to seep into her meridians, bones, and blood. She was waiting for her body, which had been severely injured last night, to fully recover. That would be the time for her to act. When that time came, she would truly become the only Chung Lingyu. She didn't know that in this room, there were 2 people standing quietly less than 5 steps away from her. "You're quite considerate of your sister," said the high priest. He waved his hand and set up a boundary around them. Even if Chung Lingyu was at her peak, she wouldn't be able to detect them, let alone the current Chung Lingyu. Gu Xingyin said, "She's my sister after all. Just take it as giving her an opportunity." Of course, she was referring to the real Chung Lingyu. The high priest took a closer look at the seated Chung Lingyu and suddenly said, "This woman is quite resilient." Gu Xingyin didn't say anything. Of course she was resilient. It was a pity that her arrival was a mistake. The 2 waited for about the time it took to brew a cup of tea. When the body had more or less recovered, Chung Lingyu calmed her mind and entered the sea of consciousness. The real Chung Lingyu's soul was still sleeping quietly, but the light around her illusory body was much stronger. This meant that if there were no external influences, she would wake up on her own soon. A murderous look appeared on Chung Ling's face. "Sorry. Since you're unlucky to have met me, you should just go into a deep sleep." She raised her hand to grab Chung Lingyu's neck. However, before she could touch Chung Lingyu's soul, she felt her body being held in place by a huge force. Then a huge pulling force tore her soul out. His surroundings were empty, as if he had nothing to rely on. Chengling knew that something was wrong. The parchment did not mention such a thing. She raised her head and her pupils shrank at what she saw. There were two people standing in front of him. She was very familiar with one of them. It was Cheng Linin, who had just received the title of Young King. The other white-clothed man's appearance and bearing was something she had rarely seen in her life, but when she saw him for the first time, her heart was filled with endless fear and admiration. This man was so scary. She turned around and looked at Cheng Lingyu, who was sitting motionlessly on the bed. Then she looked at the two people standing in front of her. She thought about what she had been through in the past few days. What else could she not understand? Chapter 8:11. Her eyes were bloodshot as she looked at the two of them. You set me up? The high priest didn't say anything. Gu Xingyin continued. We set you up? Wrong. You were the one who set me up. Cheng Ling sneered. I did all this just to keep myself alive. What's wrong with that? Gu Xingyin looked at her and replied. I did all this just to keep my fifth sister alive. What's wrong with that? Cheng Ling sneered. Don't talk about sisterhood in front of me. If you really cared about Cheng Lingyu, she wouldn't be living like that in the Protector General's manor. Gu Xingyin didn't answer the question. Instead, she said, it doesn't matter if I care about her or not. She's Cheng Linin's sister. I can't let some unknown monster take over her body. Cheng Ling knew that everything she had done during this period of time had been seen by the other party. What's more, the other party might have deliberately allowed her to get the Xian pill. She laughed. The winner takes all. Since I've lost today, I'll let you say whatever you want. She didn't say anything else and looked like she was at their disposal. Gu Xingyin didn't believe that Cheng Ling was someone who would give up so easily. Sure enough, the moment she relaxed a little, the woman suddenly dashed toward Cheng Lingyu, who was lying on the bed. Cheng Ling knew that it was impossible for her to escape. She might as well take a gamble. Although the chances of success weren't high. What if she could return to Cheng Lingyu's body? They waited until now to deal with her, because they weren't confident that they could expel her from Cheng Lingyu's body under normal circumstances. However, she had underestimated the other person in the room. The high priest didn't even need to make a move. He just glanced at Cheng Ling's soul and she froze there, unable to move. The high priest ignored the frozen Cheng Ling and went to Cheng Lingyu's side in a flash. He bent down and glanced at the unconscious person. Then he raised his hand and a misty light shot towards her body. I've already helped her stabilize her soul. She won't have to worry about being taken advantage of in the future, he told Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin knew that she was willing to do this because of her. She smiled and said, Thank you, teacher. Teacher? Cheng Ling finally knew who this man with a terrifying aura was. The rumored #1 expert of the Middle Continent, the unfathomable great consecrator of the Tianxian Empire. Indeed, it was not unjust for him to fall. She closed her eyes. In the end, she was still lacking. At this moment, Cheng Lingyu, who had been unconscious all this time, opened her eyes groggily. She was still a little confused at this moment. When she looked around, she found herself in an unfamiliar environment with two people standing beside her. One of them was her big sister, who was high and mighty. As for the other, she only glanced at her briefly before hurriedly lowering her head. The moment she lowered her head, countless memories flooded into her mind like a tidal wave, causing her to feel a little absent-minded. What had happened during this period of time? She saw that a complete stranger had taken over her life, doing things that she didn't even dare to imagine before. Cheng Lingyu admitted that those days were far more exciting than living alone in the small courtyard of the Protector General's residence. However, that wasn't her. Chapter 8:12. That wasn't her. No matter how wonderful that person's life was, it had nothing to do with her or Cheng Lingyu. Cheng Lingyu's face paled as she understood everything. Of course, she had seen how Gu Xingyin and the man in white had helped her. She walked to Gu Xingyin and bowed deeply. Thank you for your help, big sister. She bowed to the high priest on the other side. Both of them accepted the gesture calmly. Gu Xingyin said gently, Fifth sister, would you like to meet the person who harmed you? Cheng Lingyu's expression froze, then she nodded. Thank you, big sister. Gu Xingyin looked at the high priest, who then pointed at Cheng Lingyu with a finger. Cheng Lingyu felt as if her eyes were covered in frost and snow. She closed her eyes reflexively. When she opened her eyes again, she saw Cheng Lingyu, who was only a step away from her. Ah! Cheng Lingyu couldn't help but take a step back when a living person suddenly appeared in front of her. Then she thought of something and carefully sized up the woman in front of her. She had short hair and wore strange clothes. Her arms, legs, and even her abdomen were exposed. Her face was resolute and bloodthirsty. Clearly, she wasn't an easy person to get along with. Why did you harm me? Cheng Lingyu mustered up her courage and asked. Cheng Lingyu sneered. Harm you? Tell me, what kind of life have you been living in that mansion? If you were me, you'd rather die early than live such a cowardly and unambitious life. Cheng Lingyu instinctively wanted to refute her, but she had always been a woman of few words. For a moment she didn't know what to say. Gu Xingyin couldn't stand such selfish words. She retorted. No matter how she lived, it's her own business. You're an outsider. What right do you have to judge someone else's life? You're just trying to find an excuse for your selfish behavior. She looked directly at Cheng Lingyu. Fifth sister, I asked you to meet her because I wanted to ask for your opinion. What do you plan to do with this person? What to do with her? Cheng Lingyu was a little confused. In fact, even if he did not do anything, Cheng Ling's soul would dissipate from this world sooner or later. However, Gu Xingyin wanted to see if her fifth sister could stand on her own 2 feet after going through such a thing. Yes, I'll give you the choice. What do you want to do with her? Cheng Lingyu bit her lip awkwardly. She had never made such a big decision before. Gu Xingyin waited patiently. The first step was always more difficult to take. After a long while, Cheng Lingyu finally spoke. Big sister, I don't want to let her go. There was a rare look of determination in her eyes. She wants to kill me. I can't tolerate it. Gu Xingyin smiled. Then fifth sister, watch carefully. She glanced at the head consecrator, who nodded and waved his right sleeve. Cheng Ling's soul seemed to have suffered a huge impact, and suddenly became distorted and blurry. She screamed shrilly. If I don't die, I'll make you pay with your blood. She looked so scary that Cheng Lingyu couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Gu Xingyin said indifferently. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance. Cheng Ling's soul turned into ashes amidst the unwillingness and resentment. Gu Xingyin heaved a sigh of relief. No matter what, this huge threat was finally eliminated. Chapter 8:13. She turned to Cheng Ling, who was still in a daze, and asked, What are your plans for the future? Cheng Lingyu had successfully awakened and was able to cultivate mystical qi. She had the ability to protect herself. Moreover, her current identity was a headache, the second prince's concubine. All of this was the result of Cheng Ling's actions. But now, Cheng Lingyu had to bear all the consequences. Cheng Lingyu was also a little confused. Gu Xingyin could only say, Stay in the courtyard for a while this time. Think carefully about your future, and let me know when you've made up your mind. She truly felt that her fifth sister was quite pitiful. The 2 of them left the courtyard. The high priest couldn't help but ask Gu Xingyin, Why are you so concerned about your sister's matters? Why? Gu Xingyin pondered for a moment. Perhaps it was because she had paid too much attention to her from the beginning, so she couldn't pretend not to see anything along the way? She shook her head. Maybe it's fate? The great consecrator did not dwell on this topic. Instead, he brought up another matter. When do you plan to marry me? Gu Xingyin was stunned. Wedding? That was too soon. The high priest said matter-of-factly, I think in the Tianxian continent, after you've fallen in love with each other, the next step would be a wedding. He paused and looked at Gu Xingyin. Are you unwilling, Linyin? Of course, Gu Xingyin wasn't unwilling. She just didn't expect him to act so quickly. But since the high priest had brought it up, she wouldn't refuse. After receiving his disciple's affirmation, the high priest nodded. I'll ask for your opinion first. Then I'll send someone to your house to propose marriage. The chief consecrator's speed was definitely swift and decisive. In less than 3 days after he said this, he personally came to the residence of the protector of the nation. Chung Tsu-gong, the protector general of the state, who had always been resolute and cold in front of outsiders, welcomed the arrival of the head consecrator in fear and trepidation. After that, they had a conversation in fear and trepidation, accepted an extremely precious gift, and finally respectfully sent the head consecrator away. Until the person left, his expression was somewhat absent-minded. What happened just now? The high priest had just proposed marriage to him, and wanted to marry Lin Yin. General Chung finally came back to his senses. When he realized what this meant, he couldn't hide the joy on his face. The head consecrator just said that he wanted to marry Lin Yin. From now on, the great general's residence would have one more powerful in-law. Servants, invite Madam to old Madam's courtyard. The masters of the National Protector General's residence were all overjoyed when they heard the news. At this time, Chung Tsu-gong said, "The head consecrator seems to be quite anxious." The old mistress interrupted her. "Where is Yin?" Only then did General Chung remember that his daughter was still in the Xiantian Tower. At this moment, a servant suddenly came to report that eldest miss had returned home. Only then did the old madam nod. That's more like it. Of course, the bride has to stay at home to prepare for the wedding. The protector of the nation's residence was filled with joy as they prepared. The news that the high priest was going to marry his little disciple, Chung Lin Yin, had also spread. Everyone was envious of the Chung family's good luck. They had a good daughter who had actually captured the high priest's heart. As for gossiping, in this world where the strong were respected, who dared to gossip about the high priest? You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.